record.
Yes.
And then it's recording. Delightful.
Yep.
Okay.
I
So
like.
I guess I'll start this. So this is Discussions in Education. I'm doing it sporadically, but I'm trying to get regular. I'm Tony. I'm an assistant principal, and this is. Do you want to go over like what you teach? You don't have to say your school, but like just what your position is.
Yeah, so I've been at a charter school on the Central Coast for 8 school years now, and I teach a combination class. Our charter school is a hybrid model. So I teach at two of our centers, a combination class of third graders. So sometimes it's a 2-3, sometimes it's a 3-4. And I teach them history, science, art, and music. And on my non-teaching days, their parents instruct a homeschool program of math and language arts. And I'm just the roster teacher, making sure that they have support and accountability. So I teach 2 separate rosters. So I teach 4 days. So the kids are with me 2 days and with their parents 3 days.
Dang, that's
It's a
that's
little bit of an explanation, and it's also a little bit different because any teacher at my school with one roster teaching 2 in-person classes per week is considered full-time.
okay.
And they have a reasonable average salary for teaching 2 days a week and then being a roster holder for 3 days a week.
Nice.
I petitioned, I saw a chance to create a new position, and I asked to hold 2 rosters instead of 1, and they've let me do that for 6 years now. And a
Nice.
couple other teachers have tried to do it, and it just depends on what you kind of want out of your work-life balance. If you want to make a go of that, because it's quite time consuming.
Well, I mean, yeah, okay. I mean, that's good because I mean, you've been doing the hybrid model now for 8 years,
Yes.
and that was one of the things that kind of like talking with some of the other admins, and my wife Lily, she's had a real hard time like talking with them because there's this kind of misunderstanding I think on some admin parts where they think like the hybrid model is going to be less work, and Lily's like, no, it's so much more work. Like,
Yeah, and it's funny because it is more work for the teacher, and then it's extremely it just grows huge for the parent side too.
yeah,
And that's why at our school, if you're contracted as a teacher, if you teach twice a week and just oversee the parents teaching the kids 3 days a week, you're full time, and we have a competitive salary against anyone in a typical model.
nice. So I just got to ask. So you've been there for 8 years. Were you ever at a public school before that? You were,
Yes.
weren't you? For 2 years, correct?
Yeah, I did. It, I didn't get a full year contract.
Okay.
I did long-term subbing. I
Hmm.
started in the Bay Area subbing, and then I moved to the Central Coast, and I pretty much immediately got a long-term sub in a 8th grade classroom.
Nice.
So I did American history, and then right after that, I got the position, my contract at the charter school. And so I'm credentialed for single subject history. And at the charter schools, they have those really nice rules where it's a little bit of an advantage if you want to teach outside of your credentialed area. So I do have, I did collect some experience K-5 before I started teaching 8th grade. So I have been teaching 3rd grade for 8 years, but I never finished my multiple subject.
No, there's so much more extra work to go through for like a single subject to multiple as opposed to the other way around.
And
Um,
I did go in and I took grad units. So I
mhm.
have my coursework done, but I haven't finished the process. But I did also do professional development, and I have um, it's not technically a supplemental, but I'm cleared to teach English language arts in alternative classroom settings. So that would
Okay.
include like continuation schools or charter schools. So I'm cleared to do history, I'm cleared to do language arts, and I'm highly qualified, and it works for my school. So, and I always get the question, if I'm overseeing a roster of 3rd graders, I'm in charge of making sure their parents are instructing appropriately in math and language arts, but I don't have that technical credential. But
Yeah.
at this point, I've learned so much about curricula that it's just, I really get, sorry, my dog's in the background.
I
Um,
was like, is your husband just sitting back there? What's he?
yeah, this is my
Yo,
poor,
quiet.
my dog's 13 now, so
Oh,
she's a little
yeah.
loud. But I feel like there's a current conversation about parents not being um, comfortable teaching this material, and the debate about professionalization and deprofessionalization of
Yeah.
teaching. And I think that conversation is super relevant right now. If, like, at my school, I don't have to be credentialed to teach my subject area. There's a
Yeah.
new law that got passed, but that's going to be a long way coming to make sure everyone's credentialed.
Oh, when did they pass that?
That was that was last year. It's supposed to be in place this January, that you have to be credentialed within your subject area that you're teaching. And they
Hmm.
did extend the timeline for charter schools because that's the,
Well, does it apply to private schools as well?
no, not to private. It's just public.
Okay. Oh,
Just
and
public.
that just because you guys are getting public dollars, and so they're
Yes.
like, okay,
They
that
want to
makes
prove
sense.
you're highly qualified. And the thing is that as long as one person on your team has the credential, they're the figure that the person would look to make sure that they're doing an appropriate job. But they wanted to uh, make sure that moving forward, everyone is teaching within their credential area. Then I just think it should be easier to check those boxes, especially if you've been teaching that topic for such a long time. Honestly, I
Yeah.
just need to take the RECA. It's me dragging my feet. But right
The
now,
RECA is it's so technical.
yeah,
I mean, I remember. I mean, even for the English language one, the first part of the English test for teachers is like all about just like syntactical things and morphemes and phonemes, just parts of language. And I
yes,
was like, oh, thank God I literally just got taught this, because otherwise, and like from what my wife, when Lily said, the RECA's all of that.
yes,
It's just an extended, like, what are all the parts of language? And you're just like, okay. So
yeah,
I understand not wanting to
yeah.
do it.
All the literacy. And then again, that's what these parents are going to face, because since I've sat down with parents and walked them through the curriculum that they've chosen to teach their kids, that's what all the phonics books are, and that's what all the learning to read
Yeah.
books are. So, and now the parents are going to be, especially K-5, I really feel for them. The students are going to be at home doing this material, and the parent isn't going to understand the, like, the weird bracketed A. It's like, what sound does that make? Well, you're going to have to look it up on Google. So
Yep.
you need some tech savviness. So I don't know. I've had I think a interesting eye on what's happening right now, because I have been in this hybrid model for so many years, and it's already changed so much since my first year. I could have done anything my first year at that school. There was absolutely no layers of accountability, and no accountability. We didn't really even have to look at what the kids were producing at home.
Yep. That
And
was our last spring.
exactly, but every year it got tighter and tighter, because of just making sure that we're serving kids appropriately. And now we're jumping into that in many districts around California.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I mean, that's the interesting thing, is like there's that expectation, um, and like I want to hear all of the different sides from it. So like I definitely talk to parents, and I've got a lot of parents who are like just unhappy with the situation. Um, there's obviously a lot of teachers are unhappy with the situation. And no one's happy right now. Everyone's just complaining and angry. Um, one of my good friends, he has two daughters, and one's in kinder, and the other one I think was in first. And the experiences they had were drastically different, where one was like super supported by the teacher in same district, same school, but one's like super supported by the teacher and like had kind of frequent meetings throughout the week, and check-ins just to make sure they were understanding what was going on. And one was like one 15-minute session once a week.
Yeah,
And so it, like you said, it's like we are all in that, like, oh, whatever works. but I mean, have you been paying attention to kind of like what the state is suggesting as guidelines? Because even those are kind of crazy. Um,
Yeah, I was just looking at that. And so I haven't gotten my contract for next year, and my school hasn't announced what our plan is, but they're
mhm,
trying to make it as typical as possible for what our model is. And I feel like when we closed school on Friday, we reopened on Monday with the distance learning scenario, and we continue
yeah,
that for the rest of the year. And so we made the switch really quick. And so now, if we need to continue that in the fall, my school's totally prepared. um, but like you said, some parents aren't super happy about that. um, the interpretation of the teachers was really interesting. I know that with the new legislation, they're recommending students engage in like 4 hours per day. Well,
yeah,
how do you prove then that those students did 4 hours? And then how do you prove your teachers can prove that they did 4 hours? And it really comes back to the reason why distance learning is more effort than classroom teaching, and that's documentation.
yeah,
uh, and it's just that takes forever. And then so you're calling parents or emailing parents, you're trying to negotiate. Like you were explaining that first grader had a different experience than the kindergartner. Well, that teacher, the two teachers' lives might have been completely different.
yeah.
Maybe that first grade teacher had a home full of other kids, a partner in healthcare or something like that.
I think she
And
was taking
so,
care of her parents, and so I mean, that's yeah, exactly.
it's really hard to standardize when we're remote. And
Yeah,
so that goes back to your institution and how you have been able to create a plan. And if you have to create it last minute, it's with varying viewpoints of support on either side, it just gets really messy. And now admins just trying to push through July, and the state's doing stuff, the federal government's doing stuff, and it's a total mess. So parents are noticing that, and then they are trying to enroll in my school. And
yeah,
then what happened is now funding's frozen. So we can't enroll the kids who are bouncing from the schools that they don't really have faith in anymore.
yeah. No,
And then
I mean, that was one thing that I was definitely thinking of is that right now, I mean, unfortunately, that like, you are going to have a lot of parents moving from to, and I was wondering, I mean, obviously charter schools are experiencing the funding freeze, so you guys, you guys don't have an incentive unless it's like, okay, well, I think we can add like maybe one or two kids and still keep the budget the same, and it's not going to be too crazy. Um, but I was really curious about like private schools because like private schools aren't necessarily held to those rules. They're not held to any of the same rules. Um, and so, I mean, they could technically keep enrolling kids because it's just parents paying. Um, and they could say all in person. And I think one of our friends in this area said that her school, she teaches at a private school, said like, yep, in the fall we're starting back with everybody in person. And if you can't do that, then good day.
yeah.
But I'm also like, California's experiencing a teacher shortage, so it's like, you're just gonna hire someone to come in? Like, I mean, and private schools can do that, but just the
And then
situation.
the fear is with private schools is that you could lose your contract at any moment, um,
Yeah.
because it is tied to your enrollment. And I know my sister has her kids in a school that starts with preschool, and it ends, I think, in fifth grade.
Hmm.
And so she wanted them to start in preschool and know their school community as they progress. And they announced that they'll go back to their typical schedule, and they are going to be able to follow the CDC guidelines. And I think there's an advantage of living in an area with a private school like that that can charge a tuition
Hmm.
and put that into their infrastructure, and they don't necessarily have to pay private school teachers. I don't think get as much salary as some traditional ed classroom teachers.
Yeah.
um, so I feel like they could allocate their money and make sure that they have those really fancy um, disinfectant wands or whatever they're waving around,
Oh yeah.
and they can put their money in different ways that public schools can't, because it's just so tight on that budget, and we have to spend a certain amount in certain areas. And without some emergency decisions. It's so wonky.
Well, that and the emergency decision. I mean, I feel like every district superintendent has had the same response of like, we're going to wait for the county, and every county's response has been like, okay, we're going to wait for the state,
Yes.
and the state's just like, like,
Mm-hmm. And
they
they
don't
push.
want to say it either because they know it's going to be politically suicide either way. So
Yes.
yeah,
And then I know I was reading about the state budget and the add-ons about education, and I had a point in my head about that. What were you saying right before then?
I was talking about how every level has been waiting for the next level to make a
Oh,
decision, but then politically, everyone just hasn't want to take the suicide hit.
so I guess in the writing of the bill, they were saying that there's two reasons to fall back on a distance learning. And one of them is what your county health department says.
Yeah,
So it's like you're looking at your district, you're looking at your county, you're looking at the state, but then you have to go back and look at your health department, which is
yeah.
not normally related to your education department.
No, I mean, they've been working pretty closely with the county departments of ed. So the county and the county health departments have been working pretty closely together. But even then, it's like sometimes, I mean, all the CDC recommendations, I think we did the calculation, we would need to add like 7 to 10 more classrooms onto our campus and hire teachers for those classrooms in order to accommodate like just the spacing.
Yes.
Um, that's not even counting like all the like sanitizing and all the stuff that would need to occur.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm at middle school, like, so we don't have just the one cohort or two cohorts. We've got a bunch. So
That's really interesting. And I was hearing that to make room for new hires, if we were going to be splitting, and you didn't want to go to a 50-50 schedule at home, or like morning, like AM and PM classes, if you just wanted to dive into 100%, you can keep your transportation staff, your food staff, and your custodial staff. But the jobs that aren't protected at this point are support staff and special ed support staff.
hmm
So I was curious about how students in those populations that need extra services are going to make it through this time.
well, I mean, and that's, yeah. And I think a lot of, I mean, I know one of the plans that some districts are looking at is a slow bring back in as soon as possible, where they're going to start with like the high needs kids first. So they're going to start with the special ed kids and maybe like the English learners, um, start bringing them in first. So then you have the support staff around to help support those populations. So now they're protected because now they're needed to help, the populations they're supposed to be working with. Um, but I don't know. I mean, like a lot of this is just, again, like legislated. It depends on what's going to ultimately be legislated. Because I know that when the budget passed, they said they were going to pass 2 trailer bills with like all the guidelines, and those still haven't come out. So everybody's making, I mean, everybody in the Bay Area, I think I've now heard 5 different districts, and mine hasn't made their decision yet. Tonight's their board meeting, but I think 5 districts so far have stated that they're coming back to distance learning. Um, and one was a district that had like 47 admin exposed to COVID because they
Oh yeah.
decided to, yeah, they're like, maybe we're going to start in distance learning. I'm like, yeah, that was an interesting choice. I don't know why you did an in-person meeting, but okay.
So as a middle school vice principal, are you feeling like you're a part of the conversation as next steps, or do you feel like you're going to be interpreting what's going to be decided by those above and around you?
Well, my principal is part of the committee, at least for the middle school kind of like rollout plan. Um, so like, if I probably requested, I probably could have been a part of it. Um, but what I'm finding more and more is just how frustrating it's been in this whole situation. Like, teachers are frustrated because they're just like, at this point, just tell us what's happening and we'll prepare for it. Like, just tell us. I have not heard one. I mean, there's definitely teachers who have health concerns and stuff like that. Um, and they're very upfront and clear about it, and I'm like, I respect that. But I would say the vast majority of teachers are like, listen, honestly, we just need to know, and then we can plan. We can plan for our families, and we can plan for instruction.
And
Um,
were those conversations happening before you guys went on summer vacation? Or is this something you're hearing now at the, middle of July?
well, I would say when they needed to start happening, and so my principal and my point kind of early on with the staff, and we couldn't officially say like, hey, do this, but we pretty much were dropping hints all along the way of like, just prepare for distance learning. Like if you just prepare for distance learning and then we come back and let's say it's like, oh, we don't have to do distance learning, we're going to be hybrid, then okay, we can pull a lot of the things you already prepared and now you're just adding the classroom component. Or if we come back fully to the classroom, then hey, there's still stuff that you can use from the distance learning prep that you did in the classroom format, but now you're just present. And so we were kind of telling them all along, even though officially we couldn't say like prepare for distance learning because we needed an MOU with the unions, we needed approval from the district off, that sort of thing. Um, I really feel like this conversation should have started in April, but a lot of people waited until May and then June and then July. Um,
I'm curious about your lesson planning platform. If teachers had the and admin had started the conversation about, it's really bad right now, we're just going to make it through this school year, but we want to look ahead to make sure we plan for worst case scenario. um, does your school or schools you know of have a lesson planning platform where the teachers could have said, well, this is our lesson plan, this is our department platform, and let's just make sure this platform could go either way?
so we So no and yes. So as a school site, it's not a lesson planning platform. So as a school site, I mean, our district is a Google district. When this all first started, literally within like as we were going home that day, we called an emergency staff meeting. We met in like our gymnasium, so everybody was spaced because we were starting it then. Like everybody space out. All right, here's the deal. Um, Everybody should be on Google Classroom by the end of next week. Like you don't have to start inviting students yet, but you need to start setting that up and start having that process and then share the links with us so that we have access to your Google Classrooms. Um, but I mean, and I'm sure you guys have used it as well. Like Google Classroom isn't really like, it's not the greatest lesson anything. It's a great place to post stuff and then just
I, I think
follow it.
it's a platform that could be connected to both staff and student email accounts,
Yeah.
where kids can access the most effectively the things that they needed. But I don't, and then I know my friend works in a different district, and her whole department got together. Instead of having a whole bunch of different Google Classrooms, they had the kindergarten department. So
Oh,
any kindergarten student went on there and all of the assignments were the same. So it's not like 7 different teachers in the same department had to create 7 different Google Classrooms. They all use the same curriculum. It's standard. So the kids get on there, and then their Zoom supported what was announced on the platform. So
yeah.
the teachers weren't really having to do a lot of independent lesson planning. Or, but what kind of hurts me and takes more time is when a school has a curriculum that doesn't translate into digital, and then the teacher is redesigning. And
Yeah.
then it's like, are the teachers redesigning for their own classroom because they have a preference about how they want to teach? Or is the department divvying it up and saying, you're going to get unit 1, you're going to get unit 2, make sure that it can be accessible online or in person?
Yeah. Well, that's been the biggest issue with most of our adoptions. I think like most of them have online components and have online curriculum that are accessible. I think our history one is TCI, which is a really strong one. And even that has some issues. We had one with like a lot of online components. We went with Amplify for our science curriculum. And it's
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 terrible.
so rough. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
too complicated.
Yeah, no.
Um, and it's like you need to be there in class so the teacher can say like, all right, now I'll move on to the next step. And yeah, it's online, but it's like it's guided online
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, one of the big things when we were really originally doing like math and science adoptions, we did our science adoption last year. I was really pushing for CK12 because it's free, it's online, it's fully adaptable. So like if the department sat down and was like, all right, like this is the topic we want. Great. Now what are we not going to cover? What is our emphasis? What can we add to it? And it's free. So I'm like, that would save us like 80 to $150,000 and all this stuff. But so many people are like, well, it's all online. We would have to print copies. We want a classroom copy. And I'm like, well, it's a lot easier to print PDF papers front and back and cheaper for however many kids we have than it is to pay, the $250,000 for the full package from this company. Um, but apparently I wasn't eloquent enough in that, and so the teachers didn't consider it. But now I'm like looking at it, I'm like, don't you wish we had that? And a lot of teachers during the initial part were using that as supplemental because they're like, okay, well, I need this subject, and this actually is a good unit. Let's use this one. Um, I don't know. I mean, obviously, all the textbook companies are like doubling down now because they realize,
Yes.
like, oh God, we have to support this, and we
Yeah.
were kind of only doing it a little bit. Um, but
And
I don't know.
then
I mean,
different
yeah.
platforms, we actually had to change one of our platforms because they increased like 25% for next school year, their cost. And we're like, we can't go with you anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just
Well,
too
and
expensive.
that's what I'm really waiting for. I'm waiting for all of the gouging. And like it's already started, but I mean, say what you want about a free market economy or as close to it as we can be, but that's one of the things about education is like everybody looks at it and they just see dollar signs.
Yeah.
Um, so I it's a rough time. I mean, so kind of along the money route, you were mentioning you wanted to talk about SB 98. Was that?
Yeah.
So
When
what were you thinking? And maybe could you give like a brief breakdown of it? Because I was doing some research, but I don't have 100% on it.
So it was tagged on to the state budget that Newsom already signed. So it's officially going forward. And like you said, that there are a couple different things that were going to follow that bill that still is getting worked out. But
Hmm.
at this point, that was the special amendment that was going to cover distance learning and education moving into the fall. And it said in order to support schools, because accounting for attendance was so wonky in the spring, that they were going to freeze as of February. No, was it? It was last school year. Freeze of February last school
Oh
year.
yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
whatever you claimed in your attendance last school year is going to be your budget for next school year. And so the problem with that is with just this ultimate crisis, a lot of families were not happy with the spring of how the school year ended. And so they were looking around for different schooling options. And a lot of them want to transfer to non-typical or non-traditional schools like charter
Yeah.
schools, online schools, and stuff like that. So if they want to transfer, money will not follow them anymore. So the debate right now is whether or not we should stick to the traditional method of funding per pupil, or locking in a number just because this is kind of a crisis time, and making sure that schools who have a budget crisis right now can count on a number instead of being so unpredictable with the ebb and flow of enrollment right now.
Yeah.
So right now, if you wanted to move schools, money would not follow your child.
Yeah. And so that's why your only viable option is private because private you pay personally and you'll definitely get in. And then like we're saying, like for charters, it'll be yeah. No, I mean, here's the other thing too, which is that they locked in our budget. Our school population is still slated to increase.
Yeah.
We're still supposedly looking at like 20, 30 more students than we had previously. Um, and that's, I would say a part of that is because um, not only were my principal and I kind of like one of the few who are just like, we're going to get out ahead of this and say like, you need to do this. And this is, this is where you need to be posting, and you need to give us the schedule when you're posting stuff so we can share that with parents, and when you're meeting and what times you're going to be able to address students' questions. And I think overall, we had some parents who were like unhappy. Obviously, like a lot of the special ed parents were struggling, and the 504 parents. Um, some of them were like, "Well, you're not providing the services that are in my child's, plan." And we're like, "We can't. Like extended time, they're at home. They have all day. Like
Yeah.
one on one, they can email the teacher and have that conversation. But like they're
So
at
how
home.
are you guys serving your kids who are provided with services such as speech and occupational therapy?
So those ones. So I think for OT, the OT teacher was like reaching out to those families individually. We don't have many kids in occupational therapy at my school site. We are the largest special ed population in our district, but I think we only have like 15 or 20 kids receiving services.
Whoa! Are you like under 5% of your student population having IEPs? Do you know your percentage
No, 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 no. We have a lot more with IEPs, just not many that are like the severe OT
that
need.
need actual services by a service provider?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say, let's see, most of those classrooms sit around, I would say maybe we have like 30 kids in our SDC classes solid. But as far as like IEPs and 504s, that brings us up a lot higher. I think that
Oh,
brings us up to like, we had a really big class for our sixth grade this year. So they were at like, I think 34 or 35 students in sixth grade out of 250.
oh wow.
So yeah, so I mean, we have a pretty, we really do, where we're like about
And
a,
those are and you said that was that your special that your severely handicapped class that you were saying, or are these mainstreamed kids?
um, so we do a mainstream format, even with kids who are like at some other schools, they might be in an SDC class all day, just depending. We do the co-teaching model. We just seen a lot more success with it, where it's like instead of having the kids isolated in the classroom and doing like basic ELA and basic history, having them in the gen ed setting, but having those two teachers there to support them.
Oh,
Um, it's been very successful. Plus, we also have two programs that work pretty well. We do Read 180 and Math 180, which are essentially like reading catch-up programs, and a math catch-up program. And those we've had a lot of success in. They're a 2-year program ideally, and I would say probably about 80% of our students by the time they get to 8th grade, if they've been in it, will move out into general ed, just like, supported with like a para as opposed to struggling to read. Um, so I mean, no, I mean that's what I do know, that probably in April. So we did the whole like, hey, 3 weeks, nothing, and then like after spring break, we're starting all of our services up. Um, and obviously we had to tell the special IEP parents and stuff like, hey, it's not going to happen the way it was. But I do know that all of our resource teachers did do, I think they met with their students every other day. One met with their students every day at noon,
wow, yeah,
just
office
to say like,
hours.
yeah, just like, hey, what do you need help with? Like, what are we catching in? The para educators were all asking like, how can we help? And so we told them, we couldn't officially say like, do this, but we were giving them ideas. And a lot of them were working with the teachers to like reach out to support a specific student or a couple specific students,
Yeah,
just to add more time and assist the parents.
yeah.
So there's all that. Now, I mean, that's the thing. It's like we hustled a lot, and even I would say even for us, like I still wasn't happy with the situation. Um,
Because you
and
think those kids could have been served better while during distance learning?
well, yes, but at the same time, I also think that there was just a lot of confusion and a lot of hindrances, and where it's like when 100% of the para educators are asking like, can we do this? And then we have to come back with like, sorry, like district wide, they're not comfortable saying that you can do that. So you have to do like a modified, less version of that. And it's like, okay, but they're not meeting with these people in person. They're not like they're not doing that. They just want to do extra Zoom meetings. Um, but
Interesting,
there was worry about like Zoom meetings with para educators because they felt like, oh well,
because they're certified staff or classified staff, not
yeah,
certified.
yeah,
I'm
and they might misspeak or something like that. And I'm like,
yeah.
well,
Well, there's
they
lots
meet
of
in person with these kids all the time. Like, I don't know what to
well,
say.
because the number one thing that school districts get sued over is sped and I always really appreciate hearing how that department is run in different contexts and it's interesting to hear the pairs they were asking you as vice principal are you is the role of vice principal at your school, are you the 504 coordinator, like do you have multiple hats in that, or is there like a separate sped admin like at your middle school?
So my principal and I just handle things jointly. He like the way the school, what the way it worked was like I came into this school about 3 years ago, and I was brought in by one principal because she was very specific. She was like, I think you have exactly what we need. I was like, okay, no problem. She's like, build relationships, fix where you see it's broken, like, try to just like streamline stuff. I'm like, okay, I can do that. And she left at the end of my first year, and they were asking me to move up, and I was like, I am literally a first year admin. I refuse. Like, I'm not doing that.
Uh-huh.
And so there was a AP at another middle school in our district who had been acting principal at his school 2 different times because his principals had been otherwise occupied during the school year. And
Yeah.
so he stepped up multiple times, and he was having a bad time at his middle school. He's just somebody who's like very open and he's honest, and he's like, hey, this is what I want to work towards. Like, can we work towards it? What problems do you see? Um, but he was getting kind of slammed because he used to also be a teacher there. And so I think a lot of people were like, oh, you're betraying us. Now you're one of them. And he's just like,
Yeah, it's hard to
come on.
switch hats.
Yeah. So I told him to apply for our school, and then he applied and did really well on all the interviews. Um, and so he came in and pretty much brought exactly what I knew the staff wanted, which is just like they wanted transparency, they wanted open communication, and they wanted to be able to like voice their opinions without getting attacked. And so like since then, we've pretty much just been. He's still pretty new as well as far as an admin goes. I think he's been an admin for 5 years, and this is my third year. So, but
Do you
yeah,
have a
so we'll
established counseling staff as well?
yeah, so our 504 coordinator is actually our academic counselor. We just have
Okay.
one counselor. We have a social worker. We have a psychologist who works at our site and one other site. Um, we have
You have one counselor though. That,
we're a smaller school, so we have
oh,
650 kids, 670.
that's a big. I don't know how many people
I
that.
support her. Yeah, so she works more on like, I mean, she does a lot of the scheduling stuff, but
Okay.
um, we also have a computer clerk that they work together on that stuff. But honestly, the principal and I, we support her in a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
Um, and then we also have an instructional aide who we pay out of Title One, because we still get Title One funds. But her job is actually rest, uh, restorative center coordinator. So we have a whole restoration and kind of like she calls it her little come to Jesus center, but not in front of the kids, but to us.
Yeah.
Um, but that's her job, is like she helps support kids even further. So she's more for she does academic and emotional counseling. So we have a lot of supports. It's just I think a lot of us felt really useless during that March to June time. Like teachers were like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm not doing anything. Like I hate to say it, like like one thing that I have been very curious about budget wise is like with if you know enrollment declines and budgets decline, and if distance learning is going to become a reality for a long time, like most APs are for behavior. Like
Yeah.
I hate to say it, and so if that's the case, then there's not really a need for me to be at the school. Um, so
I
you know,
that's really tricky, because you kind of have to carve out what your need, and is your need coordinating department heads and curriculum and like gearing your time more towards um, finding a pathway to convert in-person classes to distance learning classes. Like you could be
yeah.
more of a curriculum advisor. um,
And that's I did do that for, but I mean that's the other thing too is like we have been working with the teacher staff and supported them in such a way that like most of them made the conversion super easy.
they're
Like a
good.
lot of them were like, oh, I just reached out to my friends in my department and they showed me how to set this up and now I'm doing it. It's like
There you go.
you're doing great. Like I'm glad. I think the only thing that I probably really did, like I did a weekly video for students. So I would record a video like anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes and just kind of give them the updates and check in and just do a little talk. And then I would send that out. But
So
again,
keeping
that's
the
not,
community together and relevant.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But no, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced all sorts of crazy things on your end as well.
It's well, and also if you're thinking about like as vice principal, what your role might be if we continue with distance learning for a while. Um, as part of the new legislation, we need to make sure that there is an area where we are collecting attendance. And if a student doesn't attend class 3 out of 5 days a week, what's your policy for following up with that?
Yeah,
Just that chronic absenteeism. And if the student doesn't submit at least 60% of their coursework, following up with that student, again, chronic absenteeism. So it could just turn into a teacher documenting and then escalating to
yeah,
the assistant principal about how do we reach these kids who don't have a supervision at home and their parents can't, be teaching them at home and they're not logging on. And
yeah,
how can we support them? Can we bring those kids in as early as possible to the campus? Those kids who are already meeting with the counselor, can we have like instead of office hours digitally, have office hours in person for at-risk populations?
no, I mean, for the next year, I'm not worried. There's so much that needs to happen that I know that I'll be able to like, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
will be busy, especially because I'm
I'm here. I'm
like,
here creating your job for you.
yeah, exactly. You're like, you can also do this. I'm like, no, please stop. Don't give any, no other ideas.
Start
Um,
sweating. Oh
yeah.
no, sorry.
Well, I'm also the most tech savvy admin in the district next to one other gentleman. So like all the other principals, when you talk with them, they're like, I can figure this out. I'm like, this is how you do this. And so, I know that as an aspect of the job, I'll already be taking care of that. Like you said, the attendance. Um, I mean, there is a bunch of stuff that I'll have to definitely step up to. Um, but it's also, I mean, the weird thing too, which is that I got into teaching because I like being around people and talking to people. Like I didn't get into teaching because I'm like, oh, I want to stay at home and do Zoom meetings. Um,
No, it's really crushing because
yeah,
I feel like there are a lot of extroverts who choose teaching for the performance aspect,
yeah,
and it is a whole nother reality when you're online with these kids and then dealing with whatever personal life problems you're having and whatever personal life problems your roster kids are having. And so I don't know, it's just rough all around, but it does seem like you have a pretty good staff culture at your school. That seems pretty positive.
yeah,
And I know I have pretty polarizing views at my school, but overall we're still pretty positive.
yeah.
Because it's funny how many people are pro charter and anti charter currently at my charter school. Um, um, and who knows, we are going to be able to enroll a number of kids even with our budget locking through the way my director has been able to finagle things. But it's going to be interesting to see the people who are coming from a traditional background now into a non-traditional background, and what they're going to be able to give that they couldn't have given their local district, because as the schools leave our traditional school model, and then our traditional school model starts to crumble, and we have all of these non-traditional things, and maybe sometimes you have a really great leader at this charter school, or maybe you have a really terrible leader, and people are falling through the cracks, and you're misusing funds, and everything is terrible and crumbles, which is the overarching charter narrative. What's going to happen to our public school institution? Yeah. And if a parent is saying, I don't like how they did it in the spring, I'm going to move to this hybrid school in the fall so I don't have to deal with my neighborhood school, but then I might move back. And it's just all those backs and forths. It's like, what can you give my hybrid school that you can't give your neighborhood school? And so I think there needs to be a lot of community outreach, and maybe some, instead of those back to school assemblies with the parent nights, get those parents online and talk about, even before school even opens. I know you said your district hasn't decided yet, but those parents really need to be talked down, because they're bailing left and right in whatever alternative they can find.
No, I mean, and then, I mean, there's, I like, again, with every adversity, I think I very much take the like, okay, so like, where can we grow? How can we get better? And obviously, public education has been stagnant it's been trying to change, but it's, changing a slow, it's changing a large boat. Whereas like an independent charter, I mean, you guys can be literally say like, we're adopting this curriculum next year and we're completely changing how we do things, and that's the way it is. But I'm hoping that a lot of schools start realizing they need to step it up. And it is not by far not a majority of teachers, but there are definitely some.
Oh, I think teachers. Your mic just went out. Oh, you're back.
Well, can you hear me on the computer?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that was weird. Huh. Wait, can you speak?
Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can. Sorry.
Okay.
No, I was using these and I think they died. Or somebody was trying to call me. I don't know. Yeah. But no, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I think there's a lot of opportunity for positive growth. Like there definitely, tech needed to be a much larger part of schooling, and a lot of teachers were reticent or scared, and this kind of was like that quick kick in the butt. Suddenly it's like, oh, now you're an expert.
Yeah, and nothing could help more than more money. So I just really hope some federal funds head our way, and some state funds and resources.
No, I mean, and I know you listened to some of the last podcast, but again, it's like, just, everybody's saying defund the police, and they're, I think, and I respect a lot of my teacher friends, but a lot of them have posted like, oh, what are you going to do with less money and higher expectations? We'll talk to a teacher. And I'm like, I talk to teachers all the time. And that's all we complain about, is the fact that we don't get enough money to do what we need to do. And so we're doing the best we can, but it's not as good as it should be, as we know it should be. And so I'm like, this is another situation where it's like, maybe we spend a lot on education. I think someone was saying like, oh, we spend more per pupil than like most other countries. But we're also, I don't know if that's actually true.
Yeah, and I think it's the way we're spending the money, because at my school, and why charters are on the rise, is that we don't own our facility, we rent.
Yeah.
We don't have a busing system. Yeah. We don't have a cafeteria. Yeah. And a lot of those things are really terrible sometimes, but I get a debit card at the beginning of every school year, and I can spend and spend and spend. I can spend so much money. I've never had to buy anything myself.
Nice.
And my debit card, I'm like, oh, I need some money for this and that, and they're just like, turn your receipt in. And our staff gets that because we don't have a facility. So it's like, what are you gonna, what area do you want to put your money into? Having a really nice facility that's safe and can be quickly adopt the CDC guidelines, or do you want to go to a school that does not own their facilities but can enter distance learning at a drop of the hat? It's just, there's so much.
But yeah, it all costs money. I mean, that's the hard part. You know, like our national spending has never reflected that like students are important, and it's never really reflected that communities are important, unless they're already wealthy communities. Because like there are communities where per pupil spending is boom through the roof.
Isn't Orange County, didn't Orange County just say that they're opening all their schools for in the fall
Yeah,
normally?
yeah, and they said we'll be able to meet. I think they said we'll be able to meet all the guidelines, and I'm like, really?
Yeah.
But I mean, if you've ever driven around the OC, it's a nice area. I'm
Wonder
like,
how that's happening.
yeah, exactly. No, I don't know. That's the thing. I think right now a lot of folks are demonizing everyone. I know some charters that were applying for like the small business loan relief. Um,
We got cut out of that, I heard.
some did, and
Yeah.
some managed to finagle it in. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then, um, and it could have also been more private schools,
Yes.
like more like that style. But also probably depending on what state you're in. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just all of that is like regulated, so just depends on whether people wanted to crack down on it. But um, I don't know. I mean, it's just such a rough time all around. And I knew that you were in a charter environment, so I was just like, oh, I'm like really curious. I mean, what is your guys' biggest, or what's your biggest worry for next year?
Honestly, we do the hybrid approach extremely successfully. Our numbers are really good comparing to our other local schools and districts, because we operate in two separate counties. So we're next to a lot of different districts. And my biggest concern is that because we rent, our facilities are not going to be able to meet the typical, what you see in typical facilities. And we are going to have to either do a AM PM kind of cohort style where you see your whole class each time, but AM or PM, or do like a whole, like a just a day with one class and a day with the other class. But again, we only have kids on campus twice a week.
Yeah.
That's it. We don't have a library. We don't have a computer room. It's all just in the classroom. It's hands-on, project-oriented learning. It's hands-on science and history. We rotate through 4 years of science. Last year I taught biology. This coming year I'm teaching earth science. And that's like really, it's really awesome. I get to do that with 8 and 9 and 10-year-olds. Um, and we generally already have small classes. I usually have 18 to 22 kids in my room. So my biggest fear is that I just want our facility to be as safe as possible. And I know my director and our student population really wants to be there for those 2 days. And I think we can make it happen. We're not stressing about a 5-day week system. We don't have buses. Like I said, we already eat outside. We don't have a cafeteria. So I guess it's just that I want my school to be successful. And I'm kind of on the fence sometimes about school of choice, because I don't want neighborhood schools to disappear. I don't think that's worth it. But if a parent wants to choose my school, I think that they should be able to choose my school because it's created for a reason. And I really think the money should follow that child.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of the reasons why like unions don't like that. And I'm obviously working in public schools only. Like, obviously that's something that's always like, oh man, like what if all these kids like go somewhere else? And then what happens to like these buildings? Like, what you were saying, like
Yep.
the
And
building.
my school's not unionized.
Yeah.
And it's really atypical from traditional models.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I never really understood is why in a county, um, I never understood why like districts individually negotiate salary and it's not a county level thing. Because generally, if you're living in the county, the costs for living in that county are pretty uniform.
Yes.
So I was always like, well, why shouldn't it just be a pay scale that's countywide, and then that would cover charters as
Mhm.
well of like, hey, this is how much you're going to get paid whether you're at a public or a charter. Um, but I don't know. Obviously you're going to have like all hell break loose with like Palo Alto and like those teachers.
Versus East Palo Alto, those are separate districts, right?
Yeah. One like EPA, I think the high school is different, and then you have Ravenswood Elementary, which is actually the elementary district of EPA. And then, like you said, Palo Alto. But then you have like Los Altos, where their teachers don't make as much as like the teachers in Mountain View.
Yes. Ooh, Mountain
More
View.
expensive to live in Los Altos, so it doesn't really. You're like, okay. Uh,
Mhm.
and then you have Mountain View, Los Altos high schools. I don't know. It's all crazy and weird, and I'm always like, um, personally, and this is probably where I definitely will get flack from folks, but it's like there's definitely a part of me that's like, well, it is kind of a consumer decision. So, like if you're not able to provide the level that now, and I'm not saying the grades, but I'm like, if they have legitimate concerns about like what you're able to provide their students, um, like I think that is reasonable. But the thing
But
that I
you
don't
need
like,
to be able to move.
yeah, but at the same time, the thing that I don't like is there, especially like as far as curriculum goes, um, like just so much of it is legislated. So it's like, well, I want them to go to a school where they can really explore and like do art and do music, and that's a standard part of the curriculum, not these traditional public schools. And it's like, well, you voted for the people that made those rules, and they're the ones who can change those rules. So if you want that in a traditional public school, all you have to do is vote for someone who's going to change that.
Instead of creating new schools that just leech populations away from,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because then, like you said, like the problem with charters is that there is a lot less accountability. So you might get like one like yours, which is highly successful and like is becoming well known and has built up to what they are now. Or you're going to get ones that are just like cash factories, which is like, hey, let's get these poor low income kids in here. Let's slam them into a classroom. Let's give them super long days. Let's burn out teachers. Um, we just got a teacher. We hired a teacher at our school for English who's coming from a charter background. And the charter that she worked at is one of those ones where they have like, they're there from, I think, 7 a.m. until 5. And like, that's just on site, not including all the additional stuff, not including the grading, not including everything else. And it's like, how can you not burn out with that schedule?
No. And yeah, it's just so interesting because we just have a handful of charters in my area, and my director likes to kind of give us the little gist of what's going on in each one. And there was a charter that the medium salary for all teachers was 70,000, and they sent anyone who wanted to go to this digital training. They sent anyone to that digital training instead of sending one person who would come back and teach that information. So they had really wonky things going on in their budget, and their charter wasn't renewed because they had all of these wonky things going on in their budget. And then there's another really well-known charter that has spread across the state, and they let vendors come in, and this is taxpayer money per student, and they say this is the amount you can spend. These are our vendors, and the vendors are horseback riding, judo lessons, swim lessons, ballet. And it's like, that's great, but my taxpayer money is letting your 8-year-old go trot around on a horse for a few hours, and that is your public school education.
Yeah.
So it's like, where's the line there? Where's the academic rigor, and where's the accountability for that? And that's why I think a lot of people are anti-charter. It's just the lack, like you said, lack of accountability. Like, how is this money being allocated? And yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it, like I said, the situation's just, it's not a happy time in the United States.
No, but I really appreciate having the time to talk to you about it, because I've been in a little bit of a bubble now for a while, and I've taken some professional development, and I've come from a few different schools, but primarily I've been in this bubble, and I've been watching this school grow and change. My first contracted year, we, like, 3 of my students sued the school, and I walked through those. And each year that we don't get sued, I get happier and happier. And we've been WASC accredited for a long time. We're A through G accredited. We started without a high school. Now we have a high school. We started in a gym with like 30 kids. Now we have 5 school sites. And even though we have some wonky things, I'm just really happy that I found the position I did find. But I know that I might not be in this position forever. And I'm invested in talking about how all models work, and it's really interesting to hear about it all.
Well, I mean, and that's the other thing too, which is like, there are definitely wrong ways to educate people, but there's a lot of right ways too. And
I think that's why, parents are like, I'm paying taxes, I want to have a choice.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to say, like, your only choice is your neighborhood school. And it's always very hard, again, to say, hey, those parents, they have the foresight to go ahead and choose a school for you. Your parents aren't available to make that choice, so now you have to sit in this understaffed school with lowering enrollment and fearing that your school's going to close and you're going to be bused somewhere else. So with any problem, it's whack-a-mole. There's just something else is going to pop up.
Well, no, I mean, one of the things I always wanted to do with like a district, especially like a district like mine, like I always was curious, I'm like, why not just turn all of the schools into individual magnets? Like, have a science and technology school, have a performing arts school, and like a history and performing arts school, have a leadership and like foreign language school, and then have the kids choose them. I was like,
now that's more of a UK model with tracking them into departments. And then that takes into test scores, K-5, what's your middle school choice, what's your high school choice, and then you get into tracking issues, and then issues.
We wouldn't need to, I mean, that's the thing, is that like, it doesn't actually have to be tracked. For middle school, it's not that important. Like, and you're gonna have to support all levels anyway when you're in middle school. So it's like, okay, just apply to what you're interested in.
Yeah.
And, I mean, for Eastside Union, which is our the feeder high school district, they have magnet programs all over, and theirs are like based on like a lottery system. But if you went to one of our middle schools and you were a history and performing arts person, and you're like, oh, well, I'd like to, go explore this political science magnet at another high school, it's like, okay, well, we've trained you for that. That's great. And I understand like the whole like worry about tracking, but at the same time, it's like, again, like if we're not requiring test scores and it's just purely like kids talk with their parents and they're like, oh, I really want you to go to the science and technology school, or I really want to go to the like leadership school where I can learn like multiple languages and, be a community leader. Okay, great. Like we've got a school for that.
Then the money's following that student. And then it's all about, I think, predictability, and the schools want to be able to catch onto their budget. And I see a lot of parent discussions about how hard it is to get an interdistrict transfer. You really have to roll it all out and it really try for a very, very good reason why your student needs to not go to their neighborhood school. So I think it's just more time and effort and infrastructure.
I know. But I mean, that's the other thing too, is like, yeah, we have individual budgets, but at the same time, like, I think there are things that you could probably predict given on your neighborhood. And if you start with polls, then you're like, okay, well, this is probably going to be the future budget for this school, and start for that now. But again, like I think there's obviously a lot of reticence. I think there's a lot of teachers. Obviously, we couldn't do that now because a lot of teachers are like, well, I don't want to change school sites, like because I'd rather be at this type of school, but you can't force me to change. It's like, well, we can, but is it worth the hassle? But then,
That's a lot of bottom line, ending the conversations with, that's a lot of hassle. We're not going to go there. We need some people to get together and say, no, like, this is worth it.
yeah. But I mean, that's the problem is like, but if we're not flexible, then we are going to get to the charters coming in and providing that need or desire that they like the community wants and that we're not providing. So, you know, that was one of the things that I understood the pushback against like CTA when everything started. They sent that memo out saying like, this is our, like across the board, like no video recordings, no required conferencing with students. And like I saw that and I was like, listen, I understand. It's like, you got to realize how bad that's going to look for teachers in the long run. I was like, because you are the one thing that is going to keep a kid connected is a video conference. Unfortunately, it's way better than text and email. And you are stating that you won't do that. I was like, good luck with that. And I think we're starting to see that pushback now with all the parents demanding, or a large number of parents starting to demand like, nope, in-person learning fully, is because of that thing. And it's unfortunate, but
yeah,
it happens. It's good time. You have to, when do you guys start back up?
Our classroom days usually start the third week of August.
Okay.
We come back for teacher training. We already got our back to school calendar for August. We got it like way back in May. So we knew. We usually take 2 weeks at the beginning of the school year to have our new trainings, our updates. We're switching some platforms, tweaking some lesson plans, and then again, probably going through a lot about training with maybe some, what do you call it, PPE, the protective gear.
Always fun.
Yeah,
you know, this is how you put on a mask, damn it. Like, not like this. Cover everything. Yeah. So I know you asked me way earlier, and so I know this. We'll wrap up soon because I know we both have kids napping that are probably coming out of it. But you did ask earlier, like, what were we using for our lesson planning platform? What are you guys using for your lesson planning platform?
Right now, we're with Chalk.
Chalk, you guys like it?
We really do. We're going to transition away from Chalk because they are upping the cost.
Oh, okay.
We might be able to funnel it into another platform. We're going to be using, is it called, I was just looking it up, Canvas.
Okay, see, I was just about to get a quote from Canvas because I was like, I've used it for obviously a lot of PD. And when I was clearing my admin credential, everything was on Canvas.
Yeah.
And so that was handy, but.
So we used to do Schoology for the kids, and then we had a parent connected tool, and then for the teachers we had Chalk. But I think the plan right now is instead of Schoology being the platform for the high schoolers and a different platform to communicate with the parents, and we weren't required to use Google Classroom, but some of us were using Google Classroom. We're going to merge all of those under Canvas, and then slowly, I think from Chalk we're going to move our lesson plans over.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, because literally with like Canvas, once you have it in, it's like 1 and then 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. So you can have like your overall unit and then each lesson for it, and then second unit, everything, and you can.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to do a lot of training on that. We haven't gotten our accounts yet. I have never used it, but that's exciting to hear. We really do like Chalk. It's really good to use. So if you were just using it as a transitional year, I would say it's a good tool.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, no, I know for us, for at least for elementary, they haven't used Google Classroom as much because it really is just not intuitive.
No.
But they have used Seesaw.
Yes, a lot of our teachers elected personally to use Seesaw.
Yeah.
But it's hard when your whole department doesn't, because then you can't collaborate with those teachers. And I really feel like just one thing per department.
Well, and I know it's definitely more of a K-5 tool.
Yeah.
As the setup and just kind of like how you utilize it. And so that's why I was like, I wonder if for the middle schools I could get a Canvas account. But what was not inspiring confidence is when I requested a quote from them, and it took the guy like 3 days to get back to me. And he's like, I can meet sometime today or tomorrow. And I'm like, it's Friday. And like I didn't see the message until like 8 o'clock at night. And I was like, well, so much for that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and so he's asked, and I'm like, I got to talk with the teachers first. Because I mean, that's the big thing now is like, I'm not buying anything unless we get a majority of teachers saying like, yes, that would be much better. So we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, best of luck.
No, thank you. And thank you for taking the time. Any last words to any teachers or parents out there or anybody who might be listening?
It's going to be, especially for parents, you're now the teacher's partner. You're in it together. And it's your child. So, and then if you're pissed that they can't go to school, bring them to work with you, because it's your employer's responsibility as well to provide for you, not just the public school system during this crisis. Get your employer to offer some childcare.
Oh, that'd be good. I was honestly, one thing that I wish that schools had started organizing were parent groups back in like April, where, okay, well, yeah, I can't, like, I can take 1 day off a week. Okay, great. So these 3 families are going to drop their kids off at your house that 1 day, and the other 4 days you'll drop your kids off.
Yep.
That's
what Facebook is for. So it's not on the schools. It's not for the schools not organizing it. So it's not a part of accountability if somebody gets sick. But there's a lot of Facebook groups saying like, who's your teacher? Let's start a rotation with the kids.
Yeah, but I mean, especially in like some of, like our district, we have a number of Title I. Like the more affluent schools are doing that naturally, but obviously the ones who are like working full time and are frontline workers, like,
yeah,
don't have the time, they won't when the school year starts. So it's like we kind of do need to play that, even though there might be a liability issue.
Yeah,
Guessed it.
there you go.
Phone tree.
Yeah.
You can contact this parent to try to set it up. I mean, maybe we can use our PTSA for that.
There you go.
That's a good idea. Just got rid of work. Thank you. You're a great soundboard.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be listening to your upcoming podcasts as they roll out every so often.
I'll try to do them at least once a week, but yeah, this last one was a little crazy. All right, take it easy.
Take care.
I got to stop and then also end. All right, here's stopping.